I'd like to welcome you to the Coaches Show. I'm your host, Matt Clark. Tonight, I have with me Stefanie Rock. She's a certified sports nutritionist, and she's also the owner of Rock Performance. Before we go into anything, I want to say a quick word. My thoughts and prayers go out to those affected from the shootings in Boulder. It's really close to home and has affected a lot of people. So I hope everybody finds peace and healing. Welcome to the show, Stefanie.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Excited to be here.
Appreciate it. That's a tough way to start a show, but
but important.
Unfortunately, those events affect a lot of people. So
yeah, absolutely.
How's your day going?
It's good. It's crazy here today, but it's good.
Good. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I greatly appreciate you taking the time to be on the show with us.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Stefanie.
Yeah. So I've been in the wellness industry for, oh my God, almost like 20 years. But even having a certification in sports nutrition, it was about 8 years ago when my kids were really involved in travel sports and specifically hockey, that I realized that what I had learned and what I knew really wasn't applying to growing athletes. They sort of are a different entity. The way their bodies are developing didn't fit into what I knew from sports nutrition. So I went back to school and specialized then in youth nutrition, and then sort of applied the changes that were necessary there. And then kind of took it a step further because the world of hockey, as you know, is crazy with its scheduling, between early morning practices and games, late night practices and games, everything in between there, and the travel and the hotels and multiple games and weekends and the tournaments and showcases, really even trying to fuel even from just the sports nutrition aspect, took on whole new challenges for their growth, but for just the hockey schedule itself. So really trying to work with athletes across the board, but hockey does have a really unique schedule for fueling these athletes and fueling their growth too.
Right. Schedules go pretty crazy. So, so what has been a major part of your wanting to do this? You see your kids and how they've reacted to certain games, or how they came out of certain games?
Actually, exactly that. My son, specifically my son, who normally can just eat anytime, we were finding that as we were going through multiple games and within a weekend, he just wasn't eating enough and didn't really know, because he would eat something and then feel too full on the ice, or wasn't eating enough and then he would be tired. And it wasn't working with trying to fuel, even just from just a specific sports nutrition basis, not working necessarily with the scheduling. So that's really where the approach kind of came from, to look specifically at these athletes and how, it's kind of a new entity. The amount of training that these kids have, these schedules that these kids have, it's kind of a new world, and we haven't really necessarily seen, except for a few different sports over the years, but we haven't seen it at this level and this height of competition in decades. So it's kind of a new approach to making sure that they're fueled, not just for what they have going on in their games and in their schedule, but really for their growth and their future health too.
Absolutely. Hold on. We all know how coaches are with sports nutrition. They tend to say, well, you guys need to eat and get ready for this game. And it's such a broad thing to say. Like you can say it, but coaches don't know that sports nutrition side. And I know from when I played and how it worked for me, what worked for some people didn't work for me.
Absolutely. And, there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of misperception. So there's a lot of re-educating that goes on with this as well, because you're exactly right. Kids will hear, whether it's from coaches or trainers or other athletes, oh, just eat healthy. And that means something different to everybody, right. With all the different fad diets that are out there and the different, pushes for protein marketing and, try this, eat this. Really, number one, it doesn't always apply to youth and teen athletes, but a lot of it is just marketing BS as well. So eat healthy doesn't really give them much to go on as far as understanding, how the body utilizes carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, how the body utilizes different micronutrients, your vitamins and minerals, and when they're needed, not just on a consistency basis, but to build around their schedule as well, too.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a lot.
And in all sports nowadays, it's gotten really, really hectic. And between school, fueling the brain even for school, and then going to sports is really tough for kids.
Absolutely. And even this whole element of, the uncertainty of COVID and, kids are doing virtual learning. So there's that aspect of, a mental fatigue that comes into that. And, some days they're in school, some days they're not, so there's a whole different level that we're kind of playing with too, of making sure they're focused and making sure that they're sleeping well. All of that's going to play a role, not just, obviously how they're eating is important, but all of it ties in together to that player development.
Right. And we talked previously about how carbs, protein, and fat play a role in what you call skate, stick, and helmet.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd like to hear more about that. What's that about?
Sure. So the three macronutrients, your carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, those are the three elements that your body needs in abundancy every day. And we hear mostly about protein. It's everywhere. You have more protein, whether it's a snack, whatever. There's this huge push on protein. And when we look at how the macronutrients work for the body, how they work for growing bodies, how they work for sport, the macronutrient that they need the most of is their carbohydrates. And I apply these to their stick, their helmet, and their skates, because if you're going to jump over the boards, you're going to get into this play, you got to get down the ice as fast as you can. You need energy, right? That's your carbohydrates. That's what's fueling the body. That's what's getting you down the ice, giving you your endurance, your energy. But once you've been on the ice for a long time, it's been a long shift, you get stuck out there in a power play, you got to get up. You want to just get that the puck down the ice as fast as you can. The next element you're going to use would be your stick, right? That's the next source that's going to get the puck on the ice. It correlates to the fats. So the body can store a good deal of carbohydrates. Now, growing bodies can't store as many as adults do. So, we hear about carbo loading. Doesn't really work for kids. And when I'm talking about kids, I'm really talking about teenagers all the way through, 21, 22. The brain's still developing till about 25. But, even if they're the tallest person in the house, I'm still talking about them, as kids. They're still growing. So those carbohydrates, they have to replenish them frequently. And when they run out of them, which does happen because they go through quickly, fat becomes the next source of the body's energy. And again, as we know, the body can hold fat as we get older. We notice it more in little kids. It's almost like a reserve tank, like on a motorcycle, where it can make that switch really quickly. It's a little bit slower as we get older. That's that switch. But carbohydrates, then fats are the next source of energy. Protein is a little bit like our helmet. It's crazy important, right? We're not going to go out there and play a game without any sort of helmet protecting for our head, but it's not going to give us any source of energy. And that's the one thing in the body protein doesn't like to do. It doesn't like to provide energy. It's really inefficient, and it's very, very slow. So when we're inundating the body with more and more protein, it can't do its other jobs of muscle repair, muscle growth, and be a catalyst for, hormones and every other, thing that's happening within the body. It can't do those jobs. So when I'm hearing parents say, I'm going to give them this because it has a lot of protein.
Right.
Number one, you need to know how much protein does your athlete even need, because it's based not only on their age, but on their gender, the amount of activity they're doing for that specific day. So it really does vary from one kid to another. And most kids, even I've got a few kids who have severe allergies and a couple kids who are vegan as well. Most kids can get all of the protein they need from their diet.
Yeah, and that's I think the biggest thing is a lot of parents don't know, and they're, and athletes, they say, oh yeah, well, I'm taking these protein shakes and pushing these protein shakes, and it's usually not what they need at that moment a lot of times. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And, a couple of things we can look at. We can look at both, whether it's just from the supplement standpoint, which can have huge risks for the athletes, and we can look at the timing of it too. When you're finished working out, there's this glycogen window. It's about 30 to 45 minutes where the body is looking to replenish all those carbohydrates, all that glycogen that was used during activity. And, we're talking about activity where it's been, a good solid hour of workout or heavy sweating. You're trying to replenish all of this. That's when they're trying to replenish the carbohydrates. But what I see a lot, and I hear parents say often, is that's when they're giving them these protein shakes. Okay, well, it's fueling their body with more protein, but it's not replenishing the glycogen. And in most cases, a lot of them, aside from the other risks, really don't have any carbohydrates in them at all either. Right. So, fueling them at that time, whether it's a piece of fruit, whether it's, some veggies, a bagel, half a sandwich, every kid's a little bit different on what they can tolerate after working out. But in that first 30 to 45 minutes, we're really looking at replenishing those carbohydrates.
Right. And I think with a lot of these kids, they tend to put things in their body that they shouldn't. And that also plays a big part in how their game is played and how they are out on the ice or out in the field.
Absolutely. And, we look at, it's often more the kids who come to me, and they're a little concerned because they want to start making some changes, but they're afraid that there's going to be, restrictions, and they can never have their favorite foods and their, their pizza and the French fries that they love. And that's not accurate at all. I mean, there's certainly room in every diet for some sort of, fun favorite foods. But we need to look at how we're fueling, when we're fueling, to really approach their recovery for what they just did and for tomorrow's recovery too.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick commercial break. On the backside of this break, we'll be back with Stefanie Rock. And we're back. We're here with Stefanie Rock. She's the owner of Rock Performance and certified sports nutritionist. Thanks again, Stefanie.
Thank you.
Yeah. So before the break, we were talking about how the carbs, proteins, and fats play a big role, and you put it into skate, stick, and helmet. So what are the key foundations of player development?
Yeah, and this is actually, it's interesting because I'm seeing that list a lot right now because we're kind of heading into this off-season time. So there's camps popping up and there's training coming up, and it's all focused on your speed and your strength and your endurance and building all this. But what it's missing really for any of those to happen is going to be truly your foundation of player development, which is based off of how you fuel, how you sleep, and how you manage your stress. Right. And without those three elements, these kids can train for all day long, and they're still not going to be able to combat, the risks of increased risk of injury or illness without looking at how they're fueling, how they're sleeping, and how they're eating, or how they're managing their stress. And a lot of that stress management kind of plays into, which I know you're familiar with, the breath work. And right. Utilizing that for stress management, for focus, and for endurance as well as recovery. So these elements that kind of get lost and get forgotten in player development are really the crucial role to all of it, and making it work so that they can show up, whether they're in the gym, whether they're on the ice, whether they're in the field, and really be ready to go, because all of this is a consistency basis, not just how they slept the night before the game or practice. Right. It's kind of building on this consistency so that that's when their recovery happens. That's when their growth happens. So teaching kids how to settle down the body so that they're away from their screens at night, getting a good quality night's sleep. Right? It's a challenge. Getting away from the screens, getting a good quality night's sleep, because most athletes, especially with these rigorous schedules, don't really allow for the amount of time that they truly need. So really we have to build into quality sleep. But fueling is a huge part of it. Looking at the stress management and looking then how they're sleeping as well. That is essential to even building anything further onto that, to the strength, the growth, the speed, and the endurance.
Absolutely. Like you touched on that breath part, the mindset is one of the biggest things. And along with that mindset, it goes nutrition. They're hand in hand. If you're not building your mind and doing what you should, with the mindset part, I mean, you have to have that nutrition to really gain that asset.
You're right, and there's so much correlation between the two. And then, there's a big correlation also then between how this is all affecting their health now and how it's affecting their future health too, because it's a sad and crazy statistic that right now 1 in 3 kids in the US has either allergies, autism, ADHD, or and I'm blanking here, allergies, autism, ADHD, or asthma. One of these 4 things. And so really we aren't just looking to fuel what's happening today, but really making sure that they have these nutritional habits under their belt, so it's going to fuel them, whether they're billeting, whether they're in college, wherever they tend to go, wherever their path leads, that they can address their future health as well, which is really important. It's not just saying, hey, you have a game today, eat this, this, and this. It's not really teaching them how to fuel for everyday health.
Right. And that, where it comes in every day, it plays a big role all the way through. And unfortunately, coaches and parents don't understand how critical that is for each player.
Absolutely. And, and it's tough because I think as coaches and as parents, we're really trying to do the best we can. And there's just so much misinformation out there. And the supplement industry is $100 billion industry. They're not really focused on making sure necessarily that you're getting what you need. They're making sure that they can sell their product.
Right. And that goes hand in hand with those energy drinks, which, those are amazing. All the kids love them.
They do. And they're a disaster. If you looked at a can, in very, very small print, most of them do have it on there. It's not a law that they do, but they should have it on there that these are not intended for anybody under the age of 18. You look at the flavors that they offer, bubble gum, and the packaging and the bright colors. These are totally geared towards our kids.
Absolutely.
But here's some of the challenges when we look at them, not just for a growing body, but for an athlete as well. When they're out there working out, their heart rate's elevated. Then we start to add in dehydration that's just naturally happening from the sweating, from the activity. Their heart rate's elevated again. When we add in the energy drinks, whether it's a 5-hour, whether it's one of the Bangs or whatever hot new energy drink is out there right now, that also elevates the heart rate. So now we've got 3 different components that are elevating the heart rate, which even though they're young, even though they're teenagers, they still are at huge risk for whether it's seizures, migraines, or heart issues currently, like heart attacks are not uncommon for a teenager to have from sports drinks, or future heart disease from them. It's a dangerous component. The other thing sometimes they'll see on a can, it's like, however many milligrams of caffeine, where it'll equate to, 1 or 2 cups of caffeine. But what they aren't taking into account are the natural herbs that are in the drinks that also have caffeine effects. Right. So it can be really detrimental. And while they think they're getting this huge burst of energy and they can skate forever, what starts to happen is that the heart rate is so high, the energy, the way the adrenaline's running in the body, they're losing focus, they're losing hand-eye coordination, and that crash is going to come in where they might be super focused for about the first minute and a half, and you're shot for the rest of the game or the practice because everything is just out of whack as far as balance with the heart rate, balance with the hydration levels, and it's just, you're losing focus. It's a dangerous aspect for growing kids and for especially growing athletes.
Right, and you get back to the breathing. It all plays a big part. Once you start dropping, all of it drops with it. So you start losing every aspect and every part of your game when you're not properly fueled.
You're exactly right. And if you're relying on these energy drinks because you're so tired, because you feel unfocused, it's definitely a good indication that something is missing in one of those key foundations, whether it's your fueling, whether it's your stress management, or whether it's your sleep. It could be all three or a combination of any of them, but something's missing if, especially as a teenager, you are lacking that much energy or focus that you're using energy drinks. Something's missing in your foundation.
Absolutely. So is there anything that you recommend for these kids, for these parents, that they can do even during games that could help bring that up and help these players during those times?
Yeah, the older kids who happen to have an ice cut, that's a great time to kind of top off the glycogen, the energy within the body. So if you happen to have an ice cut period, maybe it's an orange you can have, maybe a little bit of sports drinks, like 4 to 6 ounces we're talking. So you don't want to go in there and wham a drink so that you're feeling full and heavy then when in that short period of time. But a piece of fruit, frozen grapes, any of that you can have just as in a quick aspect during an ice cut can help top off those reserves. So it'll help get you through not just the third period, but longer energy for, you go into overtime or something, you still have that focus and you can maintain it. If you're one of the younger players and you don't have the ice cut, even keeping a second water bottle on the bench that has either a diluted sports drink or some fresh fruit inside a water bottle for you, just to kind of get a little bit more of the sugar and the glycogen that can help keep you going through the rest of the game, that can help keep the energy levels up.
Right. And so do you recommend like sports bars, anything like that? Are there any that you see that would be a help during those times?
As far as sports drinks, there's a lot. Kind of have to look at you got to turn around and take a look at the label.
Right.
I'm not an advocate at all for the synthetic sugars. Whether it's the high fructose corn syrup, sucralose, ace-sulfame potassium, which is sometimes listed as ACE-K. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 of them listed. Generally, if you're seeing anything 0 or no sugar or sugar-free, those are a good indication that you need to take a quick look at that label because they're using some sort of synthetic sugar in there. I try to steer clear of ones that have synthetic or artificial colors as well. And I'm not a big advocate of stevia either. I know it's also in a lot of the products out there. So, if you look at Body Armor, happens to be one that's it's also convenient because it's, generally on the shelf right next to Gatorade. It's about the same price point. It's easy to find. It doesn't have the synthetic sugars. It doesn't have the artificial colors. 100% coconut water is also a great option, but it is also a natural laxative, so be really careful.
Be very careful. Especially at the beginning of a game.
And they're all geared up. Give them a test run at home, see how long it takes their body to respond to it. Ideally, though, we want it to be palatable. If they're not going to drink it, it's not going to help them hydrate in the first place. So, right. In most cases, water is what we need. And, it's about half your weight in ounces. So 100-pound athlete, you're looking at about 50 ounces of water just in a daily basis. Then you're adding more for the sweat factor. And I know it gets really boring and it gets tedious, but at the same time, you can add fresh fruit. You can add frozen fruit to it just to give it a little bit more flavor. But that's where it starts for your energy, your endurance, your recovery, your immunity, your focus. Everything plays and starts with that level of hydration. And it's one of the easiest things to make and one of the things that just is overlooked most often.
Absolutely. We all know how tournament weekends go and how that plays out. I mean, you have back-to-back games or, several games in one day. Those are the major things that equate to winning and losing in a lot of games.
Absolutely. How they're hydrated and how they're fueled, for sure, because you need those recovery periods. We talked just briefly about that post-workout period. It's not just about replenishing the glycogen that you've spent to recover from that game. It's helping for what's coming next too, so utilizing that time. And, athletes that are looking to play at a higher level, you're on tournament teams, you're on travel teams, you wouldn't head to a rink without your six skates or helmet. You need to have that post-workout snack in there too. So you're coming out of practice saying, I'm starving, and having to rely on a vending machine or concession stands if they're even open, but to have that piece of fruit with you, to have something that you can use in that quick time period.
Absolutely. Well, I want to say thank you, Stefanie, for taking the time and coming on the show with us.
Thank you, Matt.
I look forward to hopefully making this semi often thing. I'd love to have you on the show again. So anytime.
Yeah. Lots to talk about.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Stefanie. I greatly appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break. On the backside of that break, we're going to be talking with Bryan Murray with the Area Scouts. Look forward to hearing what he has to say. Thanks.
Thanks.
And welcome back to the Coaches Show. My next guest is Bryan Murray, Director of Operations with Area Scouts. Welcome to the show, Bryan.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you have a busy schedule and a lot on your plate, so it means a lot having you here.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Area Scouts.
Yeah, so my background, I wish I could say I was in sports my whole life, but, I like a lot of people, played college sports and then, didn't get that chance to step on the pro field. So, I had to do a career and I was a risk manager, I was a safety manager, and all the while, have this draw back to baseball and back to, the sport that really created my whole childhood and that I loved and have so much passion for. And so I kept coaching and keeping involved as much as I could with a very demanding job. And then, recently over the past year, I felt myself at, getting past 40 and looking at, what I really have a passion for. And that's just sports and kids and development, and found a company called Area Scouts that had, just started in the beginning of March 2019, and was trying to build up some evaluators specifically in baseball and softball, and talked to the CEO and understood what their mission was to work with these young athletes between the ages of 8 and 18, and teach them about proper body movements, about reducing injury, about proper development, using kinesiology and all the the scientific methods out there to really keep the body moving and performing at the right level. And just kind of fell in love with the program. Started out as an evaluator and then found myself doing a lot of different things for the company that were more national than they were specific to my little niche in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And CEO recognized that and offered me director positions in operations, and away I went. And now, I'm trying to keep up with partnerships and 300 plus evaluators across the country in less than a year, and being in 48 states, and just loving to see this catching fire at this time where, we have a lot of injuries in all sports, but, baseball in particular with the shoulder injuries and things that these pitchers and youth athletes are now dealing with, where we didn't see this, 15, 20 years ago. Now we're seeing a huge uptick, Tommy John surgeries, labrum surgeries, rotator cuffs. So I'm happy to be part of this great initiative, this health initiative, this development initiative that's backed by, 9 different professional athletes in baseball and professional athletes in softball and football as well. So I'm just really happy and blessed to be where I am right now.
That's excellent. Yeah. I mean, that's finding your passion is the biggest thing. And I mean, we, as coaches, we teach that, right? You find your passion and you work towards that passion. And so that's great. You're living testament of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I never thought, looking back 2 years ago, I never thought I'd be sitting where I am right now. And it's just, it's a dream come true for me, and being able to work with these young athletes and really instill in them the proper mechanics, the proper development is everything I've ever wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had talked some about what you guys are about. Tell me a little bit about your base assessment.
Yeah. So first of all, I love administering it. It's a really tough, it's a tough assessment. I mean, these kids are put through about 40 to 45 minute, biomechanics workout. So the biomechanics is really just looking at flexibility, joint mobility. And that's the B of base, is biomechanics. And then we go into athleticism, which is going to isolate different extremities, look at strengths, look at weaknesses between the two body parts, which is another indicator of potential injuries that could happen down the road if you have one arm that's really compensating for the other and you don't have really even muscle structure. So we look at that from an athleticism standpoint. We're also going to look at agility in our athleticism. So we're going to look at cutting and being able to, do these certain drills that we've set up in the base system to get times on these athletes to see, if they're having the proper movements, the proper cuts, the proper footwork, and being able to do them at a high rate of speed. And then we move into what we call sequence of movement. It's really based on the kinematic chain around kinesiology, where you're deriving your power from your legs and your core out to your extremities. So we measure the athletes in that. And then we take them through an endurance portion, which, as in any sport, the endurance portion is the hardest for these athletes to do. I'm not ashamed to say that the athletes have pushed themselves enough in my evaluations that we've had a couple that have become sick. So, it's horrible to see, because you got these kids and usually 15 or 16, but it just shows that it's strenuous, but it's also they're pushing themselves. It's not us pushing them. They're pushing themselves to be the best they can be and to really prove that they can do the assessment in the full capacity. And, the endurance portion, we put at the very end of it for a reason, because we want to see what you have left in your tank. And, Anthony Anzillo, the creator of BASE, worked for many years under Dr. James Andrews. He was also a physical therapist in the XFL, physical therapist in the NFL. So this assessment is that college pro level assessment where you're going to know what you have and what you need to work on when you leave there. Right. So that's the best part of it, right? Is that what do we do after the assessment? Well, from an area scout standpoint, we're going to take all of your metrics and everything that we gathered during the base assessment, and we're going to give you the development specific to what you need for your body to make sure that you're performing at the highest level. You have the proper biomechanics, you have the proper sequence of movement, what you need to work on from endurance, from an agility standpoint, from your extremity strength. So you're going to get an all-around development plan specific just to your body and what you need to really improve on to be able to support that high level of performance that as kids go through puberty, as they get a different body they're using, that they can build that with a good foundation, which is base.
Right. And, that foundation is huge. As with a lot of sports, coaches just kind of throw different exercises at them or go say, hit the weights. This is actually breaking it down to where it's specific to each player and giving them the tools they need to build in that and maintain that that higher level through the whole time through their
Yeah, and
entire career.
that's honestly, that's, you know, that's the ideal situation. Unfortunately, we do have the situations that come up where we recognize existing conditions that we can catch during these assessments, especially in the biomechanics. So all of these body movements are things that you shouldn't feel pain in, that you should have full mobility in your joints. So we've had athletes, and I've personally had 6 athletes so far in the last 9 months where I've had to refer them out to a specialist. We're not doctors. We're not trying to be. We're recognizing movements. And when we see something that's subpar, you know, we're asking the athlete, did you feel pain? You know, how did that feel? Was that very uncomfortable for you? You know, and we're getting that detail so that we can go to the parents right then in that situation and say, you know, I really think that you might just have them checked out. And, you know, each of the situations, the athlete needed some type of care, whether it be physical therapy or, you know, just a strengthening program because they were struggling. You know, we do a lot of that strengthening program. We do a lot of those flexibilities that they need to improve that joint mobility. So, but there's been a couple, and it's great to see, and it makes me smile so much because I've been in this long enough now and done enough evaluations that I'm starting to reevaluate kids that have gone through it once already. Right. And I've been shocked, honestly. I thought there was going to be improvements, but I had one athlete, he was a pitcher and a catcher. So the most throwing on the field, right? So they're throwing all the time when they're in the game. Doesn't matter what position he's in, right?
Yeah.
He had the lowest level of shoulder mobility that I had seen. So we had given him some extra exercises that I had asked Dr. Anthony to provide me because I was really concerned about this athlete. He's going to be performing at a high level this season. He's a good player. And talked to his parents, and I said, listen, this is the situation. I really want him to focus on this over the next couple months, and we'll reevaluate it afterwards. But this is important. And I saw the kid about a month and a half afterwards, and I had done so many evaluations that I had kind of forgotten what level he was at with his shoulder. And then as I was taking some video of him catching and pitching to break down the fundamentals for him, I said, hey, you know, didn't you have some shoulder issues that we talked about? He said, yeah, my parents have been all over me to do these exercises. And I said, well, I'm here. Let's just run you through some of the shoulder mobility stuff. And I was shocked. I mean, I was immediately shocked. He got the highest grade in the shoulder mobility, being from a month and a half before, being somebody that I called our physical therapist and said, I'm really concerned about this kid getting injured if he continues to have this mobility. Right. So I was the proof is in the pudding, as they say, right? I mean, I was shocked. I thought he would have progressed, but I thought there would still be more that he would have to do. And now he's just at a maintenance level where, you know, instead of doing these every day, he can do them, you know, 3 times a week and then still keep that mobility, and then he'll be good. But I was absolutely excited to see how he had transformed in just a month and a half on our program. It made all the difference for me and why I'm doing this.
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, I think you touched on something that's vitally important is putting that time and energy into it. It isn't just getting that assessment, but it's putting that work in afterwards, adding that extra work, and not just going home and sitting and playing video games or, you know, watching TV. It's getting out and actually doing those exercises, right?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the downfall in youth sports nowadays, right? Is that, you know, we have these athletes playing games so many times a week, whether they're playing rec ball and then on the weekends they're going right into travel ball. They get practices in, but those practices aren't about endurance or anything like that. They're about plays and hitting and batting practice and throwing the ball and getting, you know, velocity on the ball and all those types of things. But they need to realize that there's a foundation there that needs to be built that's going to, you know, help them as they grow and as they start performing at a higher level. And we're trying to get back to the roots of it, I think, where we start with that foundation to ensure that as the athlete grows, as their body changes, as they get stronger, they're still going to have that flexibility and mobility to be able to support what they're going to put their body through in the high school and college years.
Absolutely. We got to take a quick break. On the backside of the show, we'll be back with Bryan Murray. Thanks. And we're back, and we're here with Bryan Murray, Director of Operations with Area Scouts. Thanks again, Bryan.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Appreciate you having me be here.
Yeah. So before the break, we were talking about the base assessment and sports injuries. What are some of the more predominant sports injuries you're seeing nowadays with kids? And has COVID played a part of that?
Well, actually, you know what? I think we're going to find out if COVID plays a part of it in this upcoming season, really, because there was a lot of kids that were shut down. So it's going to go one of two ways. And it's funny, but you're really not going to know until it happens, right?
Right.
So the first thing is, did the shutdown help these athletes to get a break, a well-needed break in the youth sports that rested their muscles, their arms? Maybe they had some existing arm condition that was going on, and that rest is really taking care of that in this kind of shutdown. Or, what else we could see is the lack of conditioning, the lack of endurance, the lack of moving and getting out and doing things that could lead to more injuries. So I think only time will tell. And it's going to be interesting to see how it is this year. I know that from my standpoint as a travel coach, we've done our best to keep the kids moving and doing a lot of things and, running a lot and keeping their conditioning up through the winter as we come into this, hopefully the end of this COVID era, as we get into summer, where they're going to have less restrictions and they're going to be playing more again. So, but, the injuries that, I think need to be mentioned, especially from a baseball standpoint, are the shoulder conditions and the elbow conditions. And, I think we can really point to two identifying factors with this. Athletes in the youth groups are playing more baseball than they ever have. And why? Because they have to get recognized by all of these colleges now, because there's this battle to get that commitment letter, right? There's this battle. And why has it become such a battle compared to 15, 20 years ago? Because every athlete is on social media. Every athlete is showing their metrics. They're showing their highlight reels. There's a lot more for these coaches to take in at the college level. Right. So there's so much exposure. So in the parent's mind, how do I get my athlete to get recognized? Well, they have to play as many games as possible, go to as many events as possible, get their top velocities as much as possible. And I think that's creating an atmosphere where there's an overuse issue, and, good or bad, it's happening. How do we get around that? Well, we can monitor, especially from a pitcher standpoint, or even an aggressive throwing standpoint. We can monitor the amount of throws that an athlete goes through in a week, and really try to be, as a parent, be that protection for our son or daughter that we need to be, right? Right. These athletes are going to throw as many innings as the coach asks them to throw. They're going to be sore, but they're not going to complain. They're going to want to pitch. They're going to want to be out there. And as parents, I think we need to take the initiative to say, what are the pitch limits? What are the things that we need to be looking at? And from an area scout standpoint, our director of pitching, Josh Zide, is putting out a free for all our premium members, an arm care program, which includes education on pitch counts and how much they should be throwing. Wow, that's great. It's all consistent with USA Baseball and and MLB regulations around pitch counts for youth. And I think as parents get more educated in this, they need to take that active role, because even with the proper body mechanics, the overuse issue is going to be there. Well, now,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just know I come from the hockey background, and I see it with coaching even in hockey, where they'll put a player out every other shift, and it's basically the same thing with baseball, where when they get so tired, their body tends to break down, and that's where a big portion of the injuries come from. Is that what you're also seeing in baseball?
Yeah, definitely. And it's the tournament style, right? Where you have 5 games in a weekend and you have three of your best pitchers that you want to pitch on Sunday, but you have to get to that final game. So you pitch them on, Friday night or Saturday. And then in the championship game, Johnny pitched 95 pitches, but we need him, we need him. But at 12 and 13 years old, coaches need to realize that that is detrimental to the athlete. And you may need him for 13, but that might be, the weekend that causes him not to go to college, not to play in college, not to have a further on longevity in the sport.
Right.
It's just it's not that important. And, I know I might be annoying some of the coaches by saying that, but it isn't. You're 13, you're 14, you're 15. Your most focus should be on getting to college and playing as many years as you can. Because I'll tell you, I talk to a lot of evaluators that are with our company specifically because their longevity in the sport was cut short. They were cut short by an injury. They understand exactly what we're doing. They want to save athletes from going through that, and they have a passion for it. And we love having them as evaluators because we know they're going to be out there trying to protect these athletes all the time, making sure they have the proper biomechanics, making sure they have the proper endurance, making sure that their parents are educated on what they need to know about pitch counts and overusage.
Absolutely. And, I think sport-wide, you see that, and kids trying to play through it and thinking they need to be out there. And ultimately, you may see it in baseball as well as any other sport. It's that burnout because it's tough to maintain that high level with those injuries because of overuse.
Yeah, and the dropout rate, not even from injury, but just kids being burnt out now at the youth baseball level is going up and up every year because they don't want to play anymore. They feel like they're just being abused out there. They're losing their passion for it because, they're playing 4 games a weekend and they're playing 3 games with rec during the week, and they're burnt out. They're not professionals that, are conditioning their bodies to withstand the 162 game season. Right. They're not built that way. And a lot of them are going through puberty and trying to adjust to their bodies changing, which is bringing up a whole different set of biomechanic issues when their bones are lengthening and their muscles are lengthening and not getting stronger. And they're awkward and
issues.
Yep.
And that's a big part.
Yeah, I was able to actually catch a shoulder issue when I first started with Area Scouts. That was a growth plate issue in a kid's shoulder that he had to, get some serious therapy for. There was a hitch in his shoulder blade. Naturally the shoulder kind of comes into a slot when you rotate it, and his kind of did a jagged motion. And I caught it during our evaluation and was able to get him the care he needed.
Well, and that's exactly it. And that, in return, that prolongs his career. It makes it so he isn't feeling that pain and cutting his career short because of that.
Right. Absolutely. And so you see in all different sports. Football, you're going to see the knee injuries and the leg injuries as you see in the pros, right? Non-contact injuries are going up and up, right? Why are they going up and up? Guys are getting stronger, they're getting faster, but those ligaments can't handle the pressure they're under.
Right.
So, if we start them early on proper biomechanics and we train them, on how to strengthen the muscles around the knee joint and really to focus on that. And, a lot of our exercises we do during the base assessment will pick up on weaknesses in the knees and knee valgus, they call it, where, if you land and your knees go inward, which is a common thing with youth athletes, that's an indication of potential future injuries in the knee and the ligaments if you don't, get on top. My son was actually one of them that I put through the base assessment. He had knee valgus. I got him the right exercises, and now when he does certain movements like that, he doesn't have it, which I'm very happy to see he's improved from that.
Right, and it's repetition, doing the same thing over and over, and that's getting that set in a player's mind. And it sounds like that's what a big part of Area Scouts is giving them those tools and that repetition to make sure their mechanics are correct.
Yeah, so base gives them the foundation, and then our on-field assessment, we actually break down every aspect of their game in the fundamentals, and we really centralize that around the body movement. So, our pitching delivery is going to be around the kinematic chain, right? It's going to be around making sure you're using your core, and your arm is not what you're putting all the stress on, but it's your full body. And that sequence of movement where you're getting the hips and then the torso and then the shoulders and then the arm, so that you're getting that power from your core out to your extremities, and not having just an arm thrower, or really isolating your arm away from your body when you're throwing, so that you're putting excess strain, because exponentially that force gets greater as you go away from, we call it proximal to distal, right?
Yep.
As you get more out to the extremities, you're putting more and more force on those extremities if you don't have the proper body movements.
Absolutely. Well, I want to say thank you for being on the show again, Bryan. If someone's interested in joining Area Scouts, what is the process and how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can go to areascouts.com, and there's a Get Evaluated button right at the top of the banner there. You can do that. Or you can go to app.areascouts.com and sign up for a free profile with us. You'll be able to contact an evaluator and get an evaluation. If you want to personally contact me, you can reach out at Bryan, Bryan, at areascouts.com.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you. And I appreciate you taking the time, Bryan.
All right. Thanks, Matt. I enjoyed it. Have a good night.
You bet. Thanks. This was the Coaches Show, my first airing, and I greatly appreciate you guys joining me. One of the things I want to say before I leave tonight, I want to say my condolences to a good friend of mine. He had passed, and to his family, he had passed, lost a fight to COVID. My condolences to him, to his family, and my thoughts and prayers are with the Pickett family. I appreciate you joining my show, and have a good night.